The mood lighting. So open up your Little Atheist books, page 19, I believe it is. Page 19. You should have answered the Equip 4 and 5, because we did that together as a class. And then your homework was to finish reading the chapter and answer 6 and 7. So we will start there. Actually, it's 20. What are the first principles of thought? Now, I'm not asking this to name what they are, or at least the ones that you've studied. I want a definition for the first principles of thought. Yes, though?
They're the self-evident laws of logic.
Yeah, they're self-evident laws of logic. What does it mean, that something is self-evident?
It explains itself. It makes itself.
Okay, yeah, that's good, but also that it's like a duh, right? Like, of course this is true. To be self-evident is to be obvious. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people, are created equal. It doesn't work out that way, but we all intuitively know that everyone is created equal. So that means if they are self-evident, that means they need no proof from other principles to know that they are true. They need no proof from other principles to know that they're true. They are self-evident. They are. It's evident that they are true. So that's the definition of the first principles of thought. So one of those first principles is the law of non-contradiction. What does the law of non-contradiction say? Oh no.
If something is true, then the opposite is false.
Okay, the opposite of something that's true is false, right? So the way to say that in terms of a definition is that two contradictory things cannot be true at the same time in the same sense. So Mary can't be Mary and Kyle. She's either Mary or Kyle, or she's neither of those things. But she can't be both at the same time. Does that make sense? And if we take this to something we'll actually talk about, either God exists or he doesn't. Right? He can't exist and not exist at the same time. Either Jesus rose from the dead or he didn't. He can't be risen and not be risen. I just read on Facebook a parable that I think I will read to the juniors, because basically it's saying it is whatever you think it is. What's right is whatever you think is right. And that can't be. Because if Kyle says, today is Tuesday, and I say, no, it's not, it's Wednesday, we can't both be right. It's not a matter of what I believe, it's a matter of what's true. Does that make sense?
But if you said today's Tuesday,
I've been picking on you. Right there in front of me. Yeah?
so if you say today is Tuesday and he says today is Monday?
Well, then I'm right and he's wrong, but we can't both be right. Or we're both wrong. It could be Saturday and we came to school like, sorry. Why is this Kyle and me here, right? So the law of non-contradiction says that two contradictory things, so two things that are opposed to one another, like Jesus is risen, no he's not, cannot both be true at the same time and in the same sense. They can both be false, but they cannot both be true. Although in the case of the resurrection, they can't both be false. And then the second one is the law of the excluded middle. Now that's not, the middle child that gets forgotten all the time. That's who I was. I was never forgotten. I made myself known. My older sister was the daughter was the child that made my parents think they were really good parents, and I was the one that disabused them of that. Well, maybe we're not as good as we thought. So I was a very loud and noisy middle child. But what is the law of the excluded middle?
Principle of logic that something
Right, so something is or it isn't. So again, either God exists or he doesn't. And there's no middle ground there. Well, he's sort of kind of. No, he either exists or he doesn't. Jesus either rose or he doesn't. So there's no middle ground on a claim like that. Now there's middle ground on other things, but there's not a middle ground where it's either this or this. There can't be, there can't be a middle ground. So define these terms. What is deduction? Hey,
logical process of lining up premises and argument.
right. So you line up premises, and in the book they use like 3 line premises, right? What isn't it? All men are mortal. Zachary is a man, therefore Zachary is mortal, is I think the one they give in the book. And so that's deduction. That's if this is true and this is true and this is true, however many you want to do, then this must be true. Now, there are 2 different terms that you need to know concerning this idea of an argument. That argument has to be both valid and true. I think I think they gave you the one that says all men are 4-legged reptiles. Zachary is a man, therefore Zachary is a 4-legged reptile. That is a valid is a valid argument, meaning that if it is true that all men are 4-legged reptiles, and if it is true that Zachary is a man, then it would the third one, the conclusion has to be true. That's a valid argument. It's not true, but it's valid. Valid means that the conclusion fits the premises. But you're not done there, right? Because all of you are going, nope, I don't see any 4-legged reptiles in here. So you have to also figure out, is it true? So an argument may be valid, but it may or may not be true. I wrote one of my own. All women are bad drivers.
That's not nice.
Mrs. Keyser is a woman. Therefore, Mrs. Keyser is a bad driver.
Miss Keeter, you are not bad.
Thank you. I was hoping that someone who has
We could say all women are bad drivers.
Now, yeah, well, and I would say that there's plenty of women, including Hallie Deacon, who's a race car driver and is the older sister of one of Katie's friends. You can look her up, and she's really well known. She's not a bad driver, right? So that's a valid argument if all women are bad drivers, and if I am a bad driver. Or excuse me, if all women are bad drivers and I am a woman, then the third one is valid, but it's not true. Okay, so it has to be both valid and true. So here's the thing: how do we figure out then? So how do we know that men are not 4-legged reptiles? How do we know that?
Because we see that they're walking on 2 legs and not crawling on the floor.
Because of what we've observed, right? So how do we figure out if a deduction, if a deductive argument is true? Same way, from what we've observed. What's that called? That process of figuring out if a premise, the conclusion is true. What do we call it? Right under deduction. Induction. Induction is also known as the scientific method. It's using sense experience. It's using observation and experimentation to arrive at an answer. My very first chemistry lab in college, I did not take chemistry in high school because I didn't have to, so why would I? And I didn't want it to tank my GPA, which I was pretty sure it would. Turns out it just tanked my college GPA. And in my very first experiment, by the way, what funny thing happened? This girl across the table from me looks at me and goes, Amy Conner? And I said, her name's Lisa. We went to 6th grade together in McLean, Virginia. We ended up at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, in the same chem lab, and there were lots of chem labs, and it was a huge chem lab standing right across the table. Now, was that a small world moment or what? But so what we had to do is we had to put this one clear liquid into this titrator that would drip things out, and another clear liquid in the beaker below, and we were to titrate the top one drip at a time. And then the first question is, what happened? And it turned pink. So you, whatever happens, you turn it off. So I turned it off, and I on the sheet I put it turned pink. I'm good at this chemistry. Second question, why? I had no idea why it turned pink. I just knew that it did. That's induction, right? That what you observe and what you can experiment with scientifically. So induction is drawing conclusions from repeated observation. And that's how we know that all men aren't four-legged reptiles, because we've never seen a man that is a four-legged reptile. Is it possible one's out there? Snakes, yeah, but not. But that doesn't make them four-legged reptiles. So that's the difference between deduction and induction. You're going to need to know that, and you're going to need to write a valid and true 3-line deduction of your own, and it needs to be both valid and true. Okay, so that'll be on your test. So how is truth known? How do we know what is true? What is true? Yeah.
It's absolute and undeniable.
Okay, that's what it is, but how do we know what truth, how is truth known? How do we know what is true? How do we discover what is true? It's those same principles of logic, induction, deduction, through observation, through logic. We can figure out what's true, not just in the chem lab, but in theology and philosophy and questions like that. We can use induction, deduction, logic to find what is truth. So truth is known through the first principles of logic, right? We can at least know what's not true as well, which gets us closer to what is true. So the law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded. So we understand that when it's in the chem lab. Yeah, we figured this out because we did this experiment. But how are truths about God known? How do we find out truths about God? And I don't mean the Bible yet. Because at this point in the class, we don't even know if we can trust the Bible. We'll get there, but we don't know that yet. We haven't tested the Bible. By the way, once we've observed, once we've used logic, once we've done all of that, can we be like 100% sure on everything? No, particularly on religious claims. That's where faith comes in. And that's why this is called I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, because we're going to line up the evidence for God and the evidence for no God. And it turns out that there's a lot more proof for God than for no God. And so it takes more faith, that gap between what we can be certain of and what we know completely, that's faith. That's where faith comes in. And it turns out that atheists have a lot larger gap than Christians. So even with the first principles of logic, induction, deduction, and logic, there's still a need for faith. Still that gap. So how are truths about God known? And I hinted at this just. Yeah, faith. Okay, faith, yes, but faith isn't something that you can quantify. You'd have faith because you quantify it. Does that make sense? Your faith is based on this. Maybe what were you going to say? Yeah, observation, right? So we use induction, observation, just as we do with other truths. We use logic, just as we do for other truths. One of the things we're going to talk about is that we assume that when we see a book that some intelligent being created this book. We don't think it's just some sort of cosmic accident. It had a purpose, and some intelligent being wrote it. So when we look at the universe, we're just everything we see. We know a student came in today, and I haven't even had a chance to read it yet, but wrote that on the wall. I didn't assume that some sort of ghost came in and wrote that on the wall, right? I assume that there's an intelligent cause behind it. Got a very complex universe. That makes more sense. And so we use the same things when we look at questions about God, truths about God. So review the story that told by Dr. Geisler when he attended the University of Detroit, the presentation he gave on logical positivism. It's on pages 58 and 59. And what fundamental problem did Dr. Geisler expose regarding A.J. Aird's logical positivism?
That whole section about this and the principle of empirical verifiability states that there are only two kinds of meaningful propositions.
Yeah. So what are the only two types of meaningful propositions?
Those that are true by definition and those that are empirically verifiable.
Which is induction, is the
Yeah.
scientific method, right? By observation and experiments. So logical positivism says the only propositions that are meaningful, and really that means that are true, are those that are true by definition. 2 + 2 is 4. A bachelor is an unmarried man, right? Or we can do an experiment on them, right? So induction. we can empirically, through science, prove it. And what did Geisler say about that?
Since it's neither true by definition nor empirically verifiable, it cannot be meaningful.
Right. The statement itself that the only meaningful propositions are those that are true by definition or can be empirically verified is neither true by definition nor empirically verified. It will be empirically verified. Therefore, the statement itself is self-defeating, which means that not only is it false, but it's by its own admission, by its own standard, is meaningless. And the more you are able to think in this way, the more you will see the holes in other people's arguments. See how they're self-defeating. I'm going to say that one more time just to make sure everybody got that. And this is Hume's argument. That the only things that are the only beliefs or propositions that are meaningful are those that are true by definition or empirically verifiable. They can be proven by science. And that statement is neither true by definition nor subject to this to be proven by the science. And so therefore that entire proposition. Also on the test, you're going to choose either Hume or Kant, and you're going to explain their theory and also explain why it was wrong. So those are two pretty deep things that I'm asking you to do. And you can choose between Hume and Kant, that and understanding sort of self-defeating stuff. Pretty important. Questions? Yes.
If we do both,
If you do both, can you earn the extra credit? The problem with doing both is if you don't do either of them. Because I'd rather you do one really well than two. Any other questions? Okay, you have the rest of the hour to serve. About 5 minutes.